The threshold between worlds welcome. Pause for a moment. Close your eyes and imagine something profound happening right now, in this very second. Every single night, your body enters a state so similar to death that medical professionals once struggled to distinguish between the two. Your heart rate slows, your breathing becomes shallow and irregular, your muscles disconnect entirely from your conscious will, and yet your mind remains awake, trapped in a prison of flesh, fully aware of what is happening, but utterly powerless to respond. Have you ever wondered why humans across every culture, every continent, every era describe nearly identical experiences when they approach death? Why do people from ancient Egypt speak of the same white light that modern people in Japan report seeing? Why does a person in medieval Europe describe the sensation of a loving presence beside them, the same presence felt by someone in contemporary New York? The answer might be more unsettling than you imagine. It is not because we all go to the same afterlife. It is because every single night you experience what might be called a genuine near-death experience, a literal simulation of mortality that your brain orchestrates while you sleep. This phenomenon, known as sleep paralysis, is far more than a simple nightmare or a curious quirk of the sleeping brain. It represents a moment where the boundary between life and death becomes blurred, where consciousness persists even as the body enters a state that would terrify us if we truly understood what was happening. During these episodes, the machinery of your physical form shuts down in preparation for rest, but your awareness remains firing, observing, sometimes panicking at the apparent finality of your own immobility. Before we begin this exploration together, I invite you to subscribe to the Relaxing Science channel. Give this video a like, and if you feel comfortable, share your location and the current time where you are in the world. There is something deeply connecting about knowing that people across different time zones are experiencing this journey together, all contemplating the same mysteries of consciousness and mortality simultaneously. Throughout this experience, we will venture into territories where science and philosophy intersect. We will examine the neurological mechanisms that create these episodes, understand why your brain chooses to paralyze your body each night, explore the chemical cascades that produce the sensation of another presence in the darkness, and ultimately confront a question that has haunted humanity since the beginning of thought. What is the difference between a near-death experience and a temporary death? What is the difference between sleep paralysis and genuine mortality? Are we perhaps rehearsing our own deaths every single night? And if so, what does that mean for how we understand consciousness itself? The truth is that your brain is far more sophisticated than you realize. It does not simply shut down for rest. Instead, it enters a carefully choreographed dance with your body, a dance that involves the deliberate cessation of motor control, the flooding of your consciousness with specific neurochemicals, the triggering of hallucinations so vivid that they feel more real than waking life, and the simulation of a state so close to death that your ancestors likely interpreted it as contact with the divine or the demonic. Sleep paralysis is not rare. It is not something that happens only to a select few people who are somehow neurologically unusual. Studies suggest that between 5 and 40% of the population experiences at least one episode in their lifetime. Some people experience them regularly, multiple times per month. Others go through phases where the episodes cluster together, then disappear for years before returning. The variability is remarkable, but the mechanism is universal. Your brain, regardless of your genetics, your culture, your beliefs, or your location on the planet, is capable of creating this state of apparent death. What makes sleep paralysis so fascinating, and frankly so disturbing when you truly contemplate it, is that it exists at the exact intersection of multiple states of consciousness. You are neither fully asleep nor fully awake. You are neither dreaming nor perceiving reality with accuracy. Your brain is caught between two modes of operation, and in that liminal space, strange things happen. The normal rules that govern your perception of reality seem to dissolve. Physics behaves differently. Time stretches and compresses. Your body feels simultaneously present and absent, and in many cases, you perceive another entity, a presence that is often described as overwhelmingly loving, sometimes as terrifyingly malevolent, but always as undeniably real. As we move forward through this exploration, we will build a comprehensive understanding of what happens inside your brain and body during these episodes. We will examine the specific neuronal mechanisms, the neurotransmitter shifts, the evolutionary purposes of this temporary paralysis, and the philosophical implications of experiencing something so close to death on a nightly basis. We will see how the science of sleep paralysis illuminates not just the nature of consciousness, but perhaps the nature of death itself. The journey ahead requires an open mind and a willingness to sit with discomfort. Some of what we will explore may challenge your understanding of what is real, what is possible, and what it means to be conscious. But I encourage you to stay with it. There is profound beauty in understanding the mechanisms of your own mind, even when those mechanisms create experiences that feel frightening or inexplicable. Understanding the science does not diminish the mystery. If anything, it deepens it. When the body becomes a tomb, your muscles are not simply resting when you sleep. They are being held in a state of deliberate, enforced paralysis. This is not something that happens by accident, nor is it a side effect of sleep. It is an active, intentional process orchestrated by specific regions of your brain that send inhibitory signals down your spinal cord, essentially telling your muscles to cease all voluntary movement. This process is called REM atonia, where REM stands for rapid eye movement, the stage of sleep in which most of your vivid dreams occur. To understand this, imagine your spinal cord as a communication highway. Under normal circumstances, when you are awake and moving through the world, your brain sends signals down this highway constantly. These signals travel from your motor cortex through the brainstem, down the spinal cord, and finally to the muscles themselves, creating the movements that allow you to walk, gesture, speak, and interact with your environment. But during REM sleep, something extraordinary happens. Specific structures in your brain, particularly a region called the pons, begin to release neurotransmitters that essentially block these signals before they can reach your muscles. The messages are still being generated, but they are intercepted before they can be executed. This means that during REM sleep, your brain is still sending motor commands. Your dreams are full of action. You might be running, fighting, embracing someone you love, or fleeing from danger. But these commands never reach your muscles. Instead, they are stopped at the spinal cord level. Your body remains perfectly still, locked in a state that is sometimes called paradoxical sleep, because it combines the high brain activity of wakefulness with the muscular immobility of deep sleep. It is a paradox because you would expect someone who is thinking actively, dreaming vividly, to be moving, but instead they are completely still. The evolutionary purpose of this mechanism is actually quite logical, even though it creates the terrifying experiences we are exploring. Imagine what would happen if your muscles were not paralyzed during dreams. You would physically act out your dreams. If you dreamed of running, your legs would flail. If you dreamed of fighting, your arms would thrash. If you dreamed of falling, your body would jerk violently. This would be dangerous not only for you, but for anyone sleeping nearby. You might injure yourself by striking walls or furniture. You might inadvertently harm a sleeping partner. You might fall out of bed or crash into objects in the darkness. The paralysis is actually a protective mechanism, a way that your brain ensures your safety while you are in an unconscious state, and therefore unable to make conscious decisions about your movements. But here is where it becomes disturbing. During sleep paralysis, the normal coordination between your sleeping mind and your paralyzed body breaks down. Normally, when you are in REM sleep, your consciousness is engaged in the dream. You are not aware that your body is paralyzed because your conscious attention is focused on the dream narrative. But during sleep paralysis, something goes wrong with this coordination. Your consciousness awakens, but the paralysis remains in place. Suddenly, you are aware of your complete inability to move, but you do not know why. Your brain is not sending you the message that this is normal, that this is part of the sleep cycle, that the paralysis is temporary and protective. Instead, your conscious mind interprets the situation with alarm. You are awake, you cannot move, and you have no explanation for why. The physical sensation of this immobility is difficult to describe to someone who has never experienced it, but those who have often used language that conveys weight and pressure. Many people report feeling as though something heavy is sitting on their chest. Others describe a sensation of being buried, of the weight of the earth pressing down on them. Some feel as though their entire body is encased in concrete, that they are locked inside their own flesh. The respiratory system, which is normally automatic and requires no conscious control, suddenly becomes a focal point of attention. Your breathing becomes shallow. Each breath requires deliberate effort. You are acutely aware of each inhalation and exhalation in a way that you would never be during normal wakefulness. This heightened awareness of breathing is itself a feedback loop that intensifies the fear and panic. When you become frightened, your breathing naturally becomes more shallow and rapid. But in the state of sleep paralysis, where you are already struggling to breathe deeply, this panic-induced shallow breathing creates the sensation that you are suffocating, that your lungs are not receiving enough air. Your heart rate increases in response to the fear, and you become hyper-aware of your heartbeat, sometimes describing it as irregular, sometimes as pounding so hard that you fear your heart might burst from your chest. In reality, these cardiovascular changes are modest and not dangerous, but in the altered state of consciousness that characterizes sleep paralysis, they feel catastrophic, life-threatening, like the final moments before death. The muscles themselves are not just passively relaxed, they are being actively inhibited, held in a state of tension that is unlike normal relaxation. This creates a peculiar sensation in which your muscles feel simultaneously heavy and tense, as though they are being held in place by invisible restraints. Some people report that they can feel the effort of the paralysis, that they can sense their muscles straining against invisible bonds, trying desperately to move but unable to overcome the neurological lock that has been placed on them. This sensation is so vivid that many people, upon waking from an episode, believe they were physically restrained, that someone held them down, that they were truly trapped. The duration of sleep paralysis episodes is typically brief. Most episodes last only a few seconds to a few minutes, though the subjective experience of time during these episodes is profoundly distorted. What might objectively be 30 seconds of paralysis can feel like hours to the person experiencing it. The brain's sense of time is disrupted during these liminal states between sleep and wakefulness. Minutes feel like eternities. This temporal distortion adds another layer of horror to the experience. Not only are you paralyzed and unable to move, but you are trapped in a psychological state where time itself becomes meaningless, where seconds stretch into subjective eternities. The brain's farewell protocol. Deep within your brain every single night, a process begins that could be called a rehearsal of mortality. This process involves the deliberate death of neurons, a phenomenon called apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. It is not the violent death of cells that occurs from injury or disease. Instead, it is an orderly, orchestrated process in which cells receive chemical signals that trigger them to shut down their operations and disappear. This might sound alarming, but it is actually one of the most important maintenance processes your brain performs. Without apoptosis, your brain would accumulate dead and dying cells, would become clogged with neurological debris, and would gradually lose its ability to function. The irony is profound. In order for your brain to remain healthy and capable of supporting conscious life, it must regularly engage in a process that mimics death at the cellular level. Neurons are created, they serve their purpose, and then they are dismantled and removed. This cycle of creation and destruction, of birth and death at the cellular level, happens constantly throughout your life, but it intensifies during sleep, particularly during the REM stage when sleep paralysis occurs. Your brain is, in a sense, dying and being reborn every single night. The process of apoptosis during sleep is not random. Specific types of neurons are targeted for removal, particularly those that are no longer serving useful functions. During the day, as you learn and experience new things, your brain creates new neural connections. Some of these connections are useful and will be reinforced. Others are redundant or counterproductive and will be pruned away. Sleep is when this pruning happens. Your brain essentially reviews everything you learned and experienced during the day, decides what is worth keeping, and discards the rest. The neurons that supported less important information are targeted for apoptosis. They receive the chemical signals that trigger them to shut down and disappear. This process is beautiful in its precision. Your brain does not randomly destroy neurons. Instead, it has mechanisms for identifying which neurons are no longer needed, which neural connections have become obsolete, and which information is no longer valuable. The neurons that supported memories of mundane daily occurrences, of background noise, of unimportant visual information, are the ones most likely to be targeted for apoptosis. The neurons that supported important learning, emotional experiences, or significant events are more likely to be preserved and reinforced. Your brain is constantly editing itself, removing the unnecessary and strengthening the essential. But here is where it connects to sleep paralysis and the theme of nightly death. The neurochemical environment of your brain during REM sleep, the same stage in which sleep paralysis occurs, is precisely calibrated to facilitate this process of cellular death and renewal. The neurotransmitters that are flooding your brain during REM sleep are not just creating the conditions for vivid dreams, they are also creating the conditions for apoptosis. Your brain, during these hours of sleep, is literally engaging in a form of controlled cellular death, a managed destruction and renewal of its own tissue. The metaphor becomes even more precise when you consider what happens to consciousness during this process. Your conscious awareness, which is generated by the coordinated activity of billions of neurons, is not simply switched off during sleep. Instead, it is transformed. The pattern of neural activity that generates your sense of self, your sense of being a unified consciousness experiencing the world, changes dramatically during REM sleep. Some neuroscientists argue that consciousness itself becomes fragmented during dreams, that the unified self you experience during wakefulness dissolves into multiple, sometimes contradictory streams of awareness. You might be simultaneously the observer and the observed, the protagonist and the audience, the one who is afraid and the one who is causing the fear. When sleep paralysis occurs, when the normal coordination between sleep and wakefulness breaks down, you become aware of your brain in this altered state. You become conscious of the fact that your consciousness is not operating normally, that something fundamental about your sense of self has changed. This awareness, combined with the inability to move and the altered sensory perceptions that accompany sleep paralysis, creates the sensation of dying. You are experiencing the dissolution of your normal consciousness, the fragmentation of your unified sense of self, the alteration of your basic perceptual and cognitive processes. In a very real sense, the you that exists during wakefulness is dying, temporarily every night. The neurons involved in generating your sense of bodily awareness, your proprioception, undergo significant changes during REM sleep. Proprioception is your sense of where your body is in space, your awareness of your body's position and movement. During wakefulness, this sense is generated by constant feedback from your muscles, joints and skin, combined with neural processing in specific brain regions. But during REM sleep, this feedback is disrupted. Your muscles are paralyzed, so they are not sending the normal signals. The neural processing of bodily awareness is altered by the unique neurochemical environment of REM sleep. The result is a profound distortion of your sense of your own body. You might feel as though you are floating or sinking, or that your body is in a different position than it actually is, or that your body is larger or smaller than normal, or that you are somehow outside of your body looking back at it. This distortion of bodily awareness is terrifying because it violates one of the most fundamental aspects of consciousness. Your sense of being a unified consciousness inhabiting a body is so basic, so fundamental to your experience of reality, that when it is disrupted, the disruption feels catastrophic. You do not simply have the thought that your body awareness is distorted. Instead, you experience the distortion directly. Your body feels wrong, feels alien, feels as though it belongs to someone else or has been fundamentally changed. This is the sensation of dying, because death, from the perspective of consciousness, is the ultimate disruption of the sense of self inhabiting a body. Consciousness trapped in flesh. Imagine the most profound disconnection you can conceive of. Your mind is fully awake, your consciousness is operating at normal levels of awareness, your thoughts are clear and coherent, and yet you cannot move a single muscle. You cannot speak. You cannot change your position. You cannot even move your eyes, though this varies between individuals. You are locked inside your own body, fully aware of this fact, with no explanation for why it is happening and no certainty that it will ever end. This is the essential horror of sleep paralysis, and it is a horror that strikes at the very heart of what it means to be human. Human consciousness is predicated on a sense of agency, on the fundamental belief that we can act on the world, that our thoughts can be translated into actions, that we have control over our own bodies. When you decide to move your arm moves. When you decide to speak, your mouth produces words. This automatic translation of intention into action is so seamless that you do not normally think about it. You do not consciously command each muscle to contract in a specific sequence. Instead, you simply intend the action, and your brain handles the details of execution. But during sleep paralysis, this fundamental connection is severed. Your intention to move remains intact, but the execution is blocked. You can think clearly about moving. You can desire to move with desperate intensity, but the signal to move never reaches your muscles. The neurological reason for this disconnect is clear. The same inhibitory signals that prevent your muscles from acting out your dreams are still in place. But your consciousness has awakened while these inhibitory signals remain active. The two systems have become desynchronized. Normally, consciousness and motor inhibition are coordinated. When you are in REM sleep, your consciousness is engaged in the dream, and you are unaware that your muscles are paralyzed. When you wake up, the motor inhibition is lifted, and your muscles become responsive again. But occasionally the timing goes wrong. Your consciousness awakens before the motor inhibition is lifted. You become aware of your paralysis while it is still in effect. This desynchronization creates a state of consciousness that is utterly unlike normal wakefulness. You are awake in the sense that you are conscious, that your thoughts are coherent, that you are aware of your surroundings and of yourself. But you are not awake in the sense that you have control over your body and the ability to interact with the world. You are awake but powerless. You are conscious but imprisoned. The psychological impact of this state cannot be overstated. It is one of the most disturbing experiences that a human being can have, precisely because it violates the fundamental assumptions that consciousness makes about its relationship with the physical body. The sensory distortions that accompany sleep paralysis intensify this sense of disconnection. During REM sleep, your brain is not receiving the normal patterns of sensory information from your body and the world. Your eyes are closed, so you are not receiving visual information in the normal way. But your brain is still generating visual experiences, the dreams that characterize REM sleep. When you wake up during REM sleep, this creates a conflict. Your brain is still generating the visual hallucinations of the dream, but you're also aware that your eyes are closed, that you should not be seeing anything. The result is a visual experience that is distorted, often described as seeing through a fog, or seeing the room you are in but with a dreamlike quality, as though you are seeing it through glass or through water. The sense of hearing is similarly distorted. You might hear sounds that are not present in the room, sounds that are products of your dreaming brain. You might hear voices speaking to you, or hear music, or hear the sound of movement. Some people report hearing intense buzzing or humming sounds, sounds that seem to emanate from inside their own head. This auditory hallucination can be so vivid and so disturbing that people often believe someone has entered their room, that they are under attack, that something is happening to them that requires immediate action. But when they finally regain control of their body and turn on the lights, the room is empty, the sounds cease, and they are left confused about what they experienced. The sense of touch is perhaps the most disturbing of the distorted senses during sleep paralysis. Many people report feeling a physical presence, a sense of hands touching them, of pressure on their chest, of someone or something physically manipulating their body. This tactile hallucination is so vivid that people often believe they have been touched by an external entity, that someone has entered their bedroom and is physically assaulting them. The sensation can be gentle and comforting, or it can be aggressive and violent. The variation seems to depend on factors like stress levels, cultural beliefs, and the specific neurochemical state of the brain during the episode. But regardless of the quality of the sensation, the fact that it feels real is what makes it so psychologically impactful. The temporal distortion during sleep paralysis adds another dimension to this experience. As mentioned earlier, time perception is altered during these episodes, but the distortion is not uniform. Sometimes time seems to move very slowly, each second stretching into subjective minutes. Other times, time seems to skip, as though minutes have passed in what felt like seconds. This temporal distortion is particularly disturbing because it undermines the sense of continuity of consciousness. Normally, your consciousness experiences time as a continuous flow. One moment leads to the next, in an orderly progression. But during sleep paralysis, this flow is disrupted. You might lose track of how long you have been paralyzed. You might fear that you will be trapped forever, even though objectively you have only been paralyzed for a minute or two. The combination of motor paralysis, sensory distortion, temporal distortion, and the intact awareness of all these abnormalities creates a state of consciousness that is truly alien. You are conscious, but your consciousness is operating in a radically different mode than normal wakefulness. You are aware, but your awareness is distorted, fragmented, and focused on the terrifying fact of your own immobility. This is the consciousness of someone who is dying, or someone who is dead, or someone who is trapped between these two states. It is a consciousness that is aware of its own powerlessness, aware of the dissolution of its normal relationship with the body, aware of the fundamental fragility of its existence. The white light phenomenon, one of the most consistent features reported across cultures and across centuries, is the appearance of white light during sleep paralysis episodes. People who have never heard of sleep paralysis, who have no cultural framework for interpreting what they are experiencing, still report seeing an intense white light. This light is often described as pure, as transcendent, as beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Some people report that the light fills their entire field of vision, that it becomes the only thing they are aware of. Others report that the light is localized, that it appears to come from a specific location in the room, or that it emanates from within their own body. The consistency of this report across diverse populations and across time periods is remarkable and demands explanation. The neurological explanation for the white light phenomenon is actually quite elegant. During REM sleep, your visual cortex, the region of your brain responsible for processing visual information, is highly active. This activity creates the visual hallucinations that characterize dreams, but during normal dreams, this visual activity is modulated by other parts of your brain. The visual experiences are integrated with the narrative content of the dream, with emotional processing, with memory. The visual hallucinations are contextualized, given meaning, incorporated into a coherent dream narrative. But during sleep paralysis, when consciousness awakens while you are still in the physiological state of REM sleep, this integration breaks down. Your visual cortex is still highly active, still generating visual experiences, but the normal modulation and contextualization of these experiences has been disrupted. Without the normal dream narrative to give structure to the visual experiences, your brain generates a simpler, more primitive visual response. One of the most basic visual experiences that the brain can generate is the sensation of light. This is not a perception of an external light source. Instead, it is a direct activation of the visual cortex that creates the subjective experience of brightness, of whiteness, of light. The brain is essentially hallucinating light, generating the experience of seeing light without any external light source present. The whiteness of this light is also neurologically explicable. White light is the combination of all colors of the visible spectrum. When your visual cortex is activated in a diffuse, non-specific way, without the structured patterns that characterize normal vision, it generates a response that is interpreted by your consciousness as white light. This is similar to what happens when you press on your closed eyes and see patterns of light and color. The pressure stimulates your visual cortex directly without going through the normal pathway of external light entering your eyes. The brain responds to this direct stimulation by generating visual hallucinations, often experienced as flashes of light or patterns of color. But the white light phenomenon during sleep paralysis is more intense and more consistent than the light you see when you press on your eyes. This intensity is likely due to the particular neurochemical state of your brain during REM sleep. During REM sleep, the neurotransmitter norepinephrine is at very low levels. Norepinephrine is involved in attention and arousal. With low levels of norepinephrine, Your brain is in a state of reduced external awareness and heightened internal focus. At the same time, other neurotransmitters are at high levels. Acetylcholine, for example, is elevated during REM sleep, and it is involved in memory formation and in the vividness of sensory experiences. The combination of low norepinephrine and high acetylcholine creates a state in which internal hallucinations are more vivid and more compelling than they would normally be. The white light is often described as coming from within, as though it is being generated from inside the person's head or body. This description is actually quite accurate in a neurological sense. The light is not coming from an external source. It is being generated by your own brain, by your own visual cortex. When you experience it as coming from within, you're experiencing an accurate representation of what is actually happening. Your brain is generating light, and that light is being experienced as internal to your own consciousness. This can create a profound sense of transcendence or of unity, a feeling that the light is part of yourself, that the light is yourself, that the boundary between the light and your consciousness has dissolved. The intensity of the white light experience is often reported as being brighter than any normal light. People describe it as painfully bright, as blindingly white, as more intense than the sun. This superlative quality to the experience is partly neurological and partly psychological. Neurologically, the direct activation of your visual cortex during sleep paralysis can indeed generate an intensity of visual experience that exceeds normal vision. But psychologically, the extreme nature of the experience, the fact that it occurs in the context of paralysis and disorientation, makes the intensity seem even greater. Your attention is focused entirely on this experience. There are no competing sensory inputs to distract you. There is no normal visual scene to provide context or comparison. The light fills your entire awareness, and this exclusivity makes it seem even more intense and overwhelming. The emotional response to the white light varies considerably between individuals. Some people experience it as beautiful, as transcendent, as the most beautiful thing they have ever seen. These people often describe the experience as sacred, as spiritual, as a glimpse of something divine or transcendent. Other people experience the white light as terrifying, as a sign that something is wrong, as the light of death or of judgment. The variation in emotional response is influenced by cultural beliefs, by previous experiences, by the overall quality of the sleep paralysis episode, and by individual personality factors. Someone who has been taught to interpret white light as a spiritual phenomenon might experience it as transcendent. Someone who has been taught to interpret it as a medical symptom might experience it as frightening. Interestingly, the white light phenomenon is not universal in sleep paralysis. Not everyone experiences it during every episode. Some people never experience white light at all. The variation in the prevalence of this phenomenon across individuals and across episodes suggests that it depends on specific neurological factors that are not fully understood. It might depend on the intensity of activation in particular regions of the visual cortex. It might depend on the balance of specific neurotransmitters. It might depend on whether your eyes are open or closed during the episode, or on the level of illumination in your room. Regardless of the specific cause, the white light phenomenon remains one of the most striking and most memorable aspects of sleep paralysis for those who experience it. The second call to action comes now. I would deeply like to know where you are listening from and what time it is in your location. Are you in a quiet place, perhaps before sleep, contemplating these mysteries? Are you in broad daylight seeking understanding of something that terrified you in the night? The time and place of your listening shapes the meaning of what you are experiencing right now. Share this with the community. Tell us where you are and when you are hearing this. Presence in the darkness. One of the most universal and most disturbing features of sleep paralysis is the sensation of another presence in the room. People across cultures, across centuries, across different belief systems report nearly identical experiences of feeling that someone or something is present with them during sleep paralysis episodes. This presence is sometimes described as loving and protective. Sometimes it is described as threatening and malevolent, but almost always it is described as undeniably real, as more real in some ways than the normal perception of reality. The person experiencing the episode has no doubt that something is present, that they are not alone, that another consciousness or entity is sharing the space with them. The neurological explanation for this phenomenon is fascinating and somewhat counterintuitive. During sleep paralysis, your brain is in a state of heightened activity in certain regions while being relatively quiescent in others. In particular, the regions of your brain responsible for self-awareness and for distinguishing between self and other are operating in an unusual mode. Normally, your brain constantly processes information about where you end and the external world begins. This sense of boundary, of separation between self and not self, is generated by specific neural processes, but during sleep paralysis, these processes are disrupted. The inferior temporal cortex and the temporoparietal junction are regions that are involved in the perception of other people, in recognizing faces and bodies and attributing mental states to them. During normal wakefulness, these regions are finely tuned to detect other people in your environment. They are constantly scanning your sensory input for signs of other consciousness, other minds, other agents in the world. But during sleep paralysis, when your sensory input is disrupted and your brain is in an unusual neurochemical state, these regions can misfire. They can interpret internal neural activity as evidence of an external presence. They can generate the perception of another person or entity in the room, even though no one is actually there. This is sometimes called hyperactive agency detection. Your brain's system for detecting agents, for recognizing other minds and other conscious beings, becomes hyperactive. It detects agency, intentionality, and presence where none actually exists. This is an evolutionary adaptation that has been useful for human survival. In ancestral environments, where danger often came in the form of other people or predators, it was better to detect a presence that was not there than to fail to detect a presence that was. Better to be paranoid and survive than to be trusting and be killed. This bias toward detecting presence, toward assuming that things in the environment are agents with intentions, is deeply embedded in human neurology. But during sleep paralysis, this adaptive bias becomes maladaptive. The hyperactive agency detection system generates the perception of a presence, and your consciousness, already in an altered state, accepts this perception as accurate. You do not question it. You do not think, this is probably a hallucination. Instead, you experience the presence as undeniably real. You know that something is there with you. You might not be able to see it clearly. You might perceive it only peripherally or as a shadow or as a sense of movement, but you know it is there. The certainty of this perception is one of the most striking features of sleep paralysis for those who experience it. The quality of this presence varies considerably. Some people report a comforting presence, a sense that they are being protected, that a loved one or a spiritual entity is watching over them. These experiences are often described as healing, as reassuring, as providing a sense of safety, even in the context of physical paralysis. Other people report a threatening presence, a sense of malevolence, of danger, fear of something hostile or predatory in the room with them. These experiences are often described as nightmarish, as terrifying, as the most frightening thing the person has ever experienced. The presence might be perceived as a dark shadow, a humanoid figure, an animal, or something completely non-human and alien. The variation in the perceived quality of the presence is partly dependent on the individual's emotional state and expectations. Someone who is expecting a spiritual visitation might perceive the presence as loving and protective. Someone who is expecting an attack might perceive the presence as hostile and threatening. But the variation is also neurologically determined. The emotional tone of the hallucinated presence is likely related to the balance of neurotransmitters in your brain during the episode. Serotonin, for example, is involved in mood regulation. During REM sleep, serotonin levels are very low. This low serotonin might contribute to the sense of threat or fear during some episodes. In other episodes, where different neurochemical conditions prevail, the presence might be perceived as benign or loving. The sense of the presence's emotional intent toward you is often reported as clear and unmistakable. The person experiencing the episode does not have to infer the presence's emotional state from its behavior or appearance. Instead, they directly perceive the presence's emotional intent. They know whether it is hostile or loving. They know whether it means to harm them or protect them. This direct perception of another being's emotional state is itself a remarkable neural phenomenon. Normally, you infer other people's emotional states from their facial expressions, their tone of voice, their body language, their behavior. But during sleep paralysis, you seem to have direct access to the emotional state of the presence without needing to infer it from behavior. This direct perception of emotional intent might be related to the neural processes involved in empathy and theory of mind. Your brain has systems for modeling other people's mental states, for understanding what they are thinking and feeling. During normal circumstances, these systems operate by analyzing behavior and generating inferences. But during sleep paralysis, when your brain is in an unusual neurochemical state and when your sensory input is disrupted, these systems might generate emotional perceptions directly without the need for behavioral analysis. You perceive the presence's emotional state directly because your brain is generating that perception internally, not because you are inferring it from external cues. The presence is often described as being very close, as being right next to the person or even pressing against them. This sense of proximity might be related to the distorted body awareness that characterizes sleep paralysis. Your brain's sense of where your body is in space is disrupted. The boundary between your body and the space immediately surrounding it becomes blurred. Something that is actually in your room, several feet away, might be perceived as being right next to you, as though it is pressing against your body. The sensation of being touched by the presence is common, and as mentioned earlier, this tactile hallucination is so vivid that many people believe they have been physically assaulted. The presence often seems to have intentions toward you. It might be trying to communicate something, to tell you something important. It might be trying to take you somewhere, to pull you away from your body. It might be trying to help you, to guide you, to show you something. The sense that the presence has agency, that it is actively doing something rather than simply being there, intensifies the experience. You are not just aware of an external presence. You are aware of that presence as a conscious being with intentions, with desires, with a will that might be aligned with your own or opposed to it. Your heart's whispered goodbye. Your cardiovascular system during sleep is already operating in an unusual mode. Your heart rate is slower than when you are awake. Your blood pressure is lower. Your blood vessels are dilated, allowing blood to flow more easily through your tissues. This cardiovascular state is part of the relaxation that characterizes normal sleep. Your body is in a restful state, conserving energy, allowing your heart and circulatory system to operate at a reduced level of activity. But during REM sleep, and particularly during sleep paralysis, your cardiovascular system experiences dramatic fluctuations that make it operate unlike any other state you experience during your life. During REM sleep, your heart rate does not remain steady. Instead, it becomes highly variable. Your heart might beat slowly for several seconds, then suddenly accelerate to a rapid rate, then slow down again. This variability is driven by the unusual balance of your autonomic nervous system during REM sleep. The autonomic nervous system has two main branches: the sympathetic nervous system, which increases heart rate and prepares your body for action, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which decreases heart rate and promotes relaxation. During normal wakefulness, these two systems work in balance, with the sympathetic system being more active when you need to act, and the parasympathetic system being more active when you are resting. But during REM sleep, this balance is disrupted. Your parasympathetic nervous system is more active than normal, which would normally lead to a slower, more regular heartbeat. But at the same time, your sympathetic nervous system is also showing signs of activity. This creates a conflict. The two branches of your autonomic nervous system are sending contradictory signals to your heart. The result is the highly variable heart rate that characterizes REM sleep. Your heart is essentially being pulled in two directions at once by systems that are sending opposing commands. When sleep paralysis occurs, when you become aware of your paralysis and your consciousness becomes flooded with fear, your sympathetic nervous system receives a powerful signal. Fear activates the sympathetic nervous system. Your body responds as though you are in danger, as though you need to prepare to fight or flee. Your heart rate increases. your blood pressure rises. Your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. The blood vessels in your skin constrict, causing you to feel cold. Your muscles tense, though in the case of sleep paralysis, they cannot move because of the REM atonia. All of these responses are designed to prepare your body for action, for fight or flight. But because you are paralyzed, you cannot act. You cannot fight and you cannot flee. Your body is preparing for action, but your body cannot move. This creates an unbearable tension, a sense that something catastrophic is about to happen, that your body is about to explode from the tension. The sense that your heart is beating irregularly is one of the most common features of sleep paralysis. People report that their heartbeat feels wrong, that it is skipping beats, that it is beating too fast, that it is pounding in their chest like a fist trying to escape. In reality, your heart is beating faster than normal, and the beat might be somewhat irregular due to the conflict between your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous systems. But the subjective sensation of irregularity is usually exaggerated. Your attention is focused so intensely on your heartbeat that you perceive minor variations as major arrhythmias. You become hyper-aware of each beat, and this hyper-awareness makes the heartbeat seem more abnormal than it actually is. The respiratory changes during sleep paralysis are equally dramatic and equally distressing. During REM sleep, your breathing becomes irregular. Your breaths vary in depth and in timing. Some breaths are deep, others are shallow. Some breaths come quickly in succession, others are separated by longer pauses. This irregular breathing is a normal feature of REM sleep. But when you become aware of your breathing during sleep paralysis, this irregularity becomes a source of terror. You become convinced that you are not breathing properly, that your lungs are not receiving enough air, that you are suffocating. You attempt to take a deep breath, but your muscles are paralyzed, so your breathing effort is minimal. You cannot expand your ribcage fully. You cannot take the deep, satisfying breath that you so desperately want. This creates a feedback loop that intensifies the sense of suffocation. Your fear causes your breathing to become even more shallow. Your shallow breathing intensifies your fear. Your fear causes your sympathetic nervous system to activate even more strongly, which causes your breathing to become even more rapid and shallow. Your consciousness becomes entirely focused on the struggle to breathe. Each breath is a conscious effort. You are acutely aware of the movement of air through your nose and mouth, of the rise and fall of your chest, of the oxygen entering your lungs. This conscious attention to breathing, which is normally automatic and requires no thought, makes the process feel labored and difficult. In reality, you are not suffocating. Your lungs are receiving adequate oxygen. Your blood oxygen levels are not dropping to dangerous levels. Your brain, despite the fear and the sense of suffocation, is receiving the oxygen it needs. The sensation of suffocation is a sensation, not a reality. But the sensation is so vivid, so compelling that it feels like reality. You feel like you are dying, like your breath is being stolen from you, like you are being slowly asphyxiated. The fear of this sensation, the conviction that you are in mortal danger, can be overwhelming. The combination of the irregular heartbeat and the shallow breathing creates a sense that your body is failing, that your vital systems are shutting down, that you are experiencing the onset of a heart attack or a stroke or some other catastrophic medical emergency. Many people who experience sleep paralysis for the first time believe they are having a medical emergency. They believe their heart is about to stop, that they are about to lose consciousness, that they are about to die. This conviction is so strong that some people, upon waking from an episode, immediately go to the hospital to have their heart checked. Medical testing reveals nothing wrong. Their heart is healthy. Their lungs are healthy. There is no medical emergency. But during the episode, the sensation was so vivid that they believed they were in mortal danger. The sense of the heart as the center of the crisis during sleep paralysis is interesting from a neurological perspective. Your heart is one of the few internal organs that you are normally aware of. You cannot see your heart, but you can feel your heartbeat, especially when you are paying attention to it. During sleep paralysis, when your attention is turned inward, when your normal external awareness is disrupted, your heart becomes the focus of your internal awareness. Your heartbeat becomes the loudest signal reaching your consciousness. The irregularity of the heartbeat, the changes in heart rate, these become the primary evidence that something is wrong. that your body is failing. Your brain interprets the irregular heartbeat as a sign of mortal danger, and this interpretation triggers the fear response that intensifies all the other symptoms. The bridge between sleep and death. For centuries, humans have wondered about the nature of death. What does it feel like to die? What is the last thing a person experiences before consciousness ceases? These are questions that philosophers have contemplated and that have haunted the human imagination. But there are people who have come close to dying, who have been clinically dead for brief periods, who have been revived and who have reported their experiences. These near-death experiences, or NDEs, are remarkably consistent across individuals and across cultures, and they are remarkably similar to sleep paralysis episodes. People who have had near-death experiences often report a sense of peace and calm, a sense that they are no longer afraid that all pain and suffering has ceased. But before reaching this state of peace, many people report a period of confusion and disorientation, a sense that something is wrong, that something is happening to their body that they do not understand. Some report a sense of their consciousness separating from their body, of watching their body from outside, of being able to see themselves lying on the ground or on a hospital bed. Some report moving through a tunnel, of being drawn toward a light. Some report encountering other beings, sometimes loved ones who have died, sometimes beings of light or spiritual entities. The parallels to sleep paralysis are striking. In sleep paralysis, you also experience a sense of separation from your body, a sense that your consciousness is not properly connected to your physical form. You also experience a sense of disorientation, of confusion about what is happening. You also often experience the white light phenomenon. You also often experience the presence of other beings. The similarities are so marked that it is reasonable to ask whether sleep paralysis and near-death experiences are essentially the same phenomenon, whether they are generated by the same neurological mechanisms. The hypothesis that near-death experiences and sleep paralysis are generated by similar neurological processes is compelling. Both involve a disruption of the normal relationship between consciousness and the body. Both involve the activation of visual hallucinations, particularly the white light phenomenon. Both involve the perception of other beings or presences. Both involve a sense of peace or of fear, depending on the specific neurochemical conditions. Both involve a sense of time being distorted, of subjective time being very different from objective time. Both involve a sense of transcendence or of profound meaning. But there are also important differences between sleep paralysis and near-death experiences. Near-death experiences often occur in contexts where the person is in genuine medical danger, where their body is experiencing actual physiological stress. Sleep paralysis occurs during normal sleep, when the body is not in any medical danger. Near-death experiences often involve a sense of moving through space, of traveling toward a destination. Sleep paralysis usually involves a sense of being trapped in place, of not being able to move. Near-death experiences often involve a sense of profound peace and acceptance. Sleep paralysis often involves a sense of fear and panic. Near-death experiences often result in a profound transformation of the person's beliefs and values. Sleep paralysis, while disturbing, usually does not produce lasting personality changes. Yet despite these differences, the neurological similarities are profound. Both seem to involve a disruption of the normal functioning of the default mode network, the network of brain regions that are active when you are not focused on external tasks, when you are thinking about yourself and your place in the world. Both seem to involve unusual activity in the regions responsible for self-awareness and for the sense of the body's location in space. Both seem to involve the activation of visual cortex in ways that produce hallucinations rather than perception of external reality. Both seem to involve the perception of presences or entities that are not actually present. The question becomes, if near-death experiences and sleep paralysis are generated by similar neurological mechanisms, what does this tell us about the nature of death itself? If the dying brain generates the same experiences as the sleeping brain, does this mean that near-death experiences are not glimpses of an afterlife, but rather the brain's natural response to the process of dying? Or does it mean something different entirely? Perhaps it means that the brain, whether in the process of dying or in the process of experiencing sleep paralysis, is tapping into something fundamental about consciousness, something that transcends the distinction between life and death, between sleep and waking. The universality of the experiences reported in both near-death experiences and sleep paralysis across cultures and across time periods is remarkable. Without modern communication, without the ability to share experiences across continents, people in ancient Egypt, in medieval Europe, in modern Japan, all report nearly identical experiences. The white light, the presence, the sense of peace or fear, the feeling of separation from the body, the sense of moving through space or being in a tunnel. These experiences are so consistent that it seems unlikely they are purely cultural constructs. Instead, they seem to be generated by the universal structure of the human brain, by the common ways that human consciousness responds to certain kinds of disruptions or alterations. This universality suggests that there is something fundamental about these experiences, something that is not dependent on individual belief systems or cultural contexts. The brain, when it is in certain states, generates certain kinds of experiences. These experiences are not arbitrary. They are not random hallucinations. They have a structure, a consistency, a logic. Understanding this structure, understanding how the brain generates these experiences, might give us insight into the nature of consciousness itself, into what happens when consciousness is disrupted, and into what consciousness might experience in the final moments before death. Lucid dreaming's darker twin. Lucid dreaming and sleep paralysis are often confused with each other, and it is true that they both involve unusual states of consciousness in which the normal rules of waking reality seem to be suspended. But they are actually quite different phenomena, and understanding the distinction between them illuminates important aspects of both experiences. In lucid dreaming, you are aware that you are dreaming, and you have the ability to control or influence the content of your dream. You might decide to fly, and suddenly you are soaring through the air. You might decide to walk through a wall, and the wall becomes permeable. You might decide to change your dream environment, and the landscape shifts. Lucid dreaming is characterized by a sense of freedom, of control, of play. It is an experience that many people find joyful and liberating. Sleep paralysis, by contrast, is characterized by a complete absence of control. You cannot move your body. You cannot change your surroundings. You cannot influence the content of your hallucinations. You are trapped, powerless, forced to experience whatever your brain generates. The quality of the experience is fundamentally different. Where lucid dreaming feels like freedom, sleep paralysis feels like imprisonment. Where lucid dreaming feels like play, sleep paralysis feels like terror. The neurological basis for the difference between these two experiences is instructive. In lucid dreaming, you are aware that you are dreaming, which means that certain regions of your prefrontal cortex, regions involved in reasoning and in the evaluation of reality, are more active than they normally are during regular dreaming. You have access to reasoning and to the ability to reflect on your own mental states. This increased activity in the prefrontal cortex gives you a sense of control. You can think about your situation, evaluate options, and decide on actions. You have access to your higher cognitive functions. This access to reasoning and decision-making is what allows you to control your dreams. In sleep paralysis, the situation is reversed. Your prefrontal cortex is not as active as it would be in lucid dreaming. Your reasoning abilities are compromised. Your ability to evaluate reality is impaired. You cannot think clearly about what is happening to you. Instead, your consciousness is flooded with fear and confusion. Your attention is focused on the overwhelming sensory and emotional experiences generated by your brain in this unusual state. You do not have the cognitive resources to reason your way out of the situation. You do not have the ability to step back and evaluate what is happening. You are trapped in the immediate, overwhelming experience. Another important difference between lucid dreaming and sleep paralysis relates to the sense of agency. In lucid dreaming, you have agency. You can make decisions, and those decisions affect your dream environment. You are the author of your experience, or at least you feel like you are. In sleep paralysis, you have no agency. You cannot make anything happen. Your attempts to move are futile. Your attempts to scream are silenced. Your attempts to escape are blocked. You are not the author of your experience, you are the victim of it. Something else is happening to you, something that you cannot control or influence. The emotional tone of the two experiences is correspondingly different. Lucid dreaming is often described as exhilarating, as wonderful, as one of the most enjoyable experiences a person can have. Sleep paralysis is often described as terrifying, as nightmarish, as one of the most distressing experiences a person can have. The difference in emotional tone is not arbitrary. It flows directly from the difference in the sense of control and agency. When you have control over your experience, when you have the ability to make things happen, you feel positive emotions. When you have no control, when things are happening to you against your will, you feel negative emotions. It is possible, though rare, for someone to experience a transition from sleep paralysis to lucid dreaming. In these cases, the person becomes aware that they are dreaming while they are experiencing the paralysis. This awareness can allow them to begin to regain some sense of control. They might realize that the presence they are sensing is a hallucination, that the white light is a hallucination, that the physical sensations are hallucinations. With this realization, they might be able to manipulate the experience, to change the hallucinations, to transform the experience from one of terror to one of exploration or play. But this transition requires a significant shift in consciousness, a movement from panic to clarity, a shift that is not easy to achieve when you are in the grip of fear. The distinction between lucid dreaming and sleep paralysis also relates to the sense of time. In lucid dreaming, time often feels elastic, changeable. You might spend what feels like hours in a lucid dream, but when you wake up, only minutes have passed. Or the opposite might happen. In sleep paralysis, time is distorted in a different way. Time often feels frozen or stretched. You might be paralyzed for only a few seconds, but it feels like minutes or hours. The distortion of time in sleep paralysis tends to be in the direction of making the experience feel longer than it actually is, whereas in lucid dreaming, time distortion can go in either direction. The progression of lucid dreaming is typically toward greater control and greater enjoyment. As you become more skilled at lucid dreaming, you become better at maintaining lucidity, at controlling your dream environment, at having experiences that are increasingly complex and satisfying. The progression of sleep paralysis is typically toward greater understanding and less fear. As you become more familiar with sleep paralysis, as you understand what is happening to you, the fear tends to decrease. You begin to recognize the experience as it is starting to happen. You begin to understand that it is temporary, that it will pass, that you are not in any genuine danger. This understanding can transform the experience from one of terror to one of fascination or even curiosity. Neurochemistry of apparent death. The neurochemical state of your brain during REM sleep is radically different from its state during wakefulness. This unusual neurochemistry is what creates the conditions for sleep paralysis, for vivid dreams, and for the illusion of death. Understanding this neurochemistry is key to understanding why sleep paralysis feels like dying, and why the experiences reported in sleep paralysis are so similar to the experiences reported in near-death situations. During wakefulness, your brain maintains a careful balance of neurotransmitters. Serotonin, which is involved in mood regulation and in the sense of well-being, is at moderate to high levels. Norepinephrine, which is involved in attention and arousal, is at moderate levels. Dopamine, which is involved in motivation and reward, is available in appropriate amounts. Acetylcholine, which is involved in memory formation and in the vividness of sensory experiences, is at moderate levels. This balance of neurotransmitters creates the mental state that characterizes wakefulness: alert, focused, stable mood, sense of agency and control. During REM sleep, this balance shifts dramatically. Serotonin levels drop to very low levels. This drop in serotonin is associated with mood changes. Low serotonin is associated with depression, anxiety, and a sense of fear or threat. Norepinephrine levels also drop, though not as dramatically. The drop in norepinephrine reduces your external awareness and your sense of attention to the outside world. Dopamine levels fluctuate dramatically during REM sleep. Acetylcholine levels rise to very high levels. This rise in acetylcholine intensifies sensory experiences, makes memories more vivid, and contributes to the vividness of dreams. The combination of very low serotonin and very low norepinephrine, combined with very high acetylcholine, creates a neurochemical state that is quite alien compared to wakefulness. Your mood is shifted toward fear and anxiety. Your external awareness is reduced. Your internal experiences are intensified. Your sensory hallucinations are vivid. Your memories are activated and incorporated into your experiences. You are essentially in a state of internal focus with a negative mood tone, a state of introspection driven by anxiety rather than curiosity. This neurochemical state is often described as similar to the neurochemical state of someone who is experiencing extreme fear or threat in waking life. When you are in genuine danger, your brain releases norepinephrine and dopamine to prepare you for fight or flight. But during REM sleep, your norepinephrine is actually low and your serotonin is very low. This creates a state of fear without the normal fight or flight response. You are afraid, but you cannot act on that fear. You are anxious, but there is no external threat. Your brain is essentially generating the internal experience of fear without the external context that would normally trigger that fear. When sleep paralysis occurs, when you become aware of this neurochemical state while you are still in it, the fear intensifies. Your consciousness interprets the unusual neurochemical state as a sign that something is wrong. Your consciousness interprets the paralysis as a sign of danger. Your consciousness interprets the hallucinations and the unusual sensory experiences as evidence that something threatening is happening. Your brain's threat detection systems activate. Your sympathetic nervous system is engaged. Adrenaline and cortisol are released. Your body goes into a state of high alert, preparing for fight or flight. But because you are paralyzed, you cannot fight or flee. The adrenaline and cortisol have nowhere to go. The activation of your sympathetic nervous system has no outlet. The result is an overwhelming sense of panic, of terror, of being in mortal danger. The neurochemistry of this state is remarkably similar to the neurochemistry of someone who is in the process of dying. As the body fails, as oxygen levels drop, as the brain begins to shut down, the balance of neurotransmitters shifts. Serotonin levels drop. Norepinephrine levels drop. The brain releases endogenous opioids, chemicals that are similar to morphine, that create a sense of calm and painlessness. The person who is dying experiences a shift in consciousness, a sense of peace, a sense that everything is okay, even as their body is failing. This shift in consciousness is largely driven by the neurochemical changes that occur as the brain responds to the dying process. The similarity between the neurochemistry of sleep paralysis and the neurochemistry of dying is striking. Both involve a shift in the balance of neurotransmitters. Both involve a drop in serotonin and norepinephrine. Both involve a sense of fear or threat that is not grounded in external reality. Both involve hallucinations and unusual sensory experiences. Both involve a sense of the dissolution of normal consciousness. It is reasonable to propose that the brain, when it is in the neurochemical state of sleep paralysis, is essentially simulating the neurochemical state of dying. The brain is rehearsing death, practicing the neurochemical cascade that would occur if the body were actually in the process of dying. This hypothesis is supported by the fact that the experiences reported in sleep paralysis are so similar to the experiences reported by people who have been clinically dead and revived. The white light, the presence, the sense of peace or fear, the feeling of separation from the body, the sense of moving through space. These experiences are reported by people in sleep paralysis and by people who have been clinically dead. If sleep paralysis is a simulation of the neurochemical state of dying, then it makes sense that the experiences would be similar. The brain, when it is in the neurochemical state that simulates dying, would generate experiences that are similar to the experiences it would generate if the body were actually dying. When fear becomes biology, the relationship between your psychological state and your physical body is not unidirectional. You might think that your emotions are generated by your brain, and that your emotions then cause your body to respond. But in reality, the relationship is bidirectional. Your body can influence your emotions just as much as your emotions can influence your body. This bidirectional relationship becomes especially apparent during sleep paralysis, where the fear you experience causes physical changes, which then intensify the fear, creating a feedback loop that can spiral into overwhelming panic. When you become aware that you are paralyzed, when you realize that you cannot move, your mind immediately interprets this as a threat. Your brain's threat detection systems activate. These systems are ancient, evolutionarily old, designed to detect danger and prepare your body to respond to it. Your brain sends signals to your adrenal glands to release adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones cause your heart rate to increase, your blood pressure to rise, your breathing to become rapid and shallow, your muscles to tense. These physical changes are designed to prepare you for fight or flight, to give you the energy and the alertness you need to respond to a threat. But in the case of sleep paralysis, the threat is not external. You are not in actual danger, but your body does not know this. Your body responds to the signal from your brain that a threat has been detected. Your body goes into a state of high alert. Your sympathetic nervous system is maximally activated. Adrenaline is flooding your bloodstream. Your heart is pounding. Your breathing is rapid and shallow. You are in a state of extreme physiological activation, a state that your body normally enters only in response to genuine external threats. The problem is that you cannot act on this physiological activation. Normally, when your body enters a state of high alert in response to a threat, you do something. You fight, you flee. You take some action that either eliminates the threat or removes you from the situation. But in sleep paralysis, you cannot do any of these things. You are paralyzed. You cannot move. Your body is prepared for action, but you cannot act. This creates an intolerable tension, a state of maximum activation with no outlet for that activation. The adrenaline has nowhere to go. The readiness for action has no target. The result is an overwhelming sense of panic and terror. This panic then causes further physical changes. Your breathing becomes even more rapid and shallow. Your heart rate increases further. Your muscles tense even more. Your body releases even more adrenaline. The feedback loop intensifies. Each moment of panic causes physical changes that make the situation seem even more threatening, which causes more panic, which causes more physical changes. The loop spirals upward, with each cycle increasing the intensity of both the psychological fear and the physical panic. The role of the breath in this feedback loop is particularly important. When you panic, your breathing becomes rapid and shallow. In the context of sleep paralysis, where your breathing is already somewhat constrained by the paralysis and by your reduced ability to expand your ribcage, the panic-induced rapid breathing can create a genuine sense of oxygen deprivation. You might feel lightheaded, you might feel dizzy, you might feel a sense of pressure in your chest. These sensations of physical distress further confirm your sense that something is genuinely wrong, that you are in genuine danger, that you might be dying. This confirmation of danger causes more panic, which causes more rapid breathing, which causes more sensations of oxygen deprivation. The sense of a presence in the room, which we discussed earlier, can intensify this feedback loop. If the presence is perceived as threatening, if you sense that it is hostile or predatory, then your sense of danger is amplified. You are not just dealing with the internal sensation of paralysis and the sense that your body is failing. You're also dealing with the perception of an external threat, an entity in the room that means you harm. This amplification of the sense of danger can push the panic to even more extreme levels. Your sympathetic nervous system is activated even more strongly. Your adrenaline levels increase even further. Your physical sensations of distress intensify. Interestingly, the reverse is also true. If you can overcome the panic, if you can reduce the activation of your sympathetic nervous system, the feedback loop can be reversed. The physical sensations of distress can decrease, which reduces the sense of danger, which reduces the panic, which reduces the sympathetic activation, which reduces the physical sensations. This is why acceptance and calm are so effective in dealing with sleep paralysis. When you accept that you are paralyzed, when you stop fighting against the paralysis, when you reduce your sense of threat, your sympathetic nervous system becomes less activated. Your breathing becomes less rapid. Your heart rate becomes less elevated. Your body becomes less tense. The sensations of distress decrease. The feedback loop reverses. The difference between acceptance and panic during sleep paralysis is often the difference between an episode that is merely uncomfortable and an episode that is terrifying. Someone who understands what is happening, who knows that sleep paralysis is not dangerous, who can maintain a calm mental state, will experience the episode as strange and uncomfortable but not terrifying. Someone who does not understand what is happening, who fears that they are dying, who panics, will experience the episode as one of the most frightening things they have ever experienced. The physical sensations are similar, but the psychological interpretation of those sensations is very different. The interpretation then drives the feedback loop in either direction, the ancient memory of dying. To understand sleep paralysis, we must understand it not just as a modern neurological phenomenon, but as an ancient survival mechanism that has been built into the human nervous system through millions of years of evolution. The mechanisms that create sleep paralysis did not evolve specifically to create sleep paralysis. Instead, they evolved to serve other purposes, purposes that were crucial for the survival of our ancestors. Sleep paralysis is a side effect or perhaps a byproduct of these evolved mechanisms. The paralysis itself, the REM atonia, evolved as a protective mechanism. As we discussed earlier, the paralysis prevents your muscles from acting out your dreams, which could be dangerous. But the deeper evolutionary purpose of this paralysis might be related to something more fundamental. In ancestral environments, when humans were prey animals as well as predators, being still and silent was a crucial survival strategy. If a predator was nearby, the best strategy was often to remain completely motionless and silent to avoid drawing the predator's attention. The nervous system of our ancestors evolved to suppress all movement and sound during sleep, to make the sleeping human invisible to predators. This evolutionary adaptation made sense in ancestral environments. Humans were vulnerable during sleep. We could not see or hear as well as many predators. We could not move as quickly or as powerfully as many predators. Our best strategy was to remain hidden, to sleep in sheltered locations, and when a predator was nearby, to remain absolutely still. The REM atonia served this purpose. It ensured that you would not move or make noise during sleep, that you would not inadvertently reveal your location to a predator. But what about the hallucinations, the white light, the presence, the sense of fear? These features of sleep paralysis are harder to explain in terms of simple survival advantage. Why would evolution have built in the tendency to hallucinate, to perceive threats that are not present, to experience fear during sleep? One possibility is that these features are also related to predator detection. In ancestral environments, humans who were more sensitive to potential threats, who more readily perceived danger, who more easily entered a state of high alert when a threat might be present, would have had better survival chances. Humans who were less sensitive to threats, who were less likely to perceive danger, would have been more likely to be killed by predators. This leads to a hypothesis. Sleep paralysis might be the brain's way of rehearsing the response to a predator encounter. When you are in sleep paralysis, when you are experiencing the fear and the sense of a threatening presence, you are in a neurological state that is similar to what you would experience if you were being attacked by a predator. You are frozen, unable to move, aware of a threatening presence. Your brain is rehearsing what to do in this situation. Your brain is practicing the response of freezing, of remaining silent, of trying to sense where the threat is coming from. This rehearsal might serve a protective function. When you actually encounter a predator in waking life, your nervous system would already be familiar with the appropriate response. Your body would know how to freeze, how to remain silent, how to avoid drawing the predator's attention. This hypothesis is supported by the fact that freezing is a common response to predator encounters in many animals. When a prey animal detects a predator, it often freezes. It stops all movement and all sound. It tries to blend in with the background and avoid the predator's attention. This freezing response is involuntary. The animal does not consciously decide to freeze. Instead, the nervous system automatically triggers a freezing response when a predator is detected. This freezing response is found across many species, suggesting that it is an ancient evolutionary adaptation. In humans, the freezing response might be triggered by sleep paralysis. During sleep paralysis, you are in a state of complete immobility. Your body is not responding to your conscious will. Instead, your nervous system has taken control, has locked your body in a state of complete stillness. This is similar to the freezing response seen in other animals. Your nervous system, responding to the perceived threat of the presence in the room, has triggered a complete freezing response. Your body has been locked in place. Your breathing has become shallow and silent. You are making yourself as inconspicuous as possible. The fear that accompanies sleep paralysis might also serve an evolutionary function. The fear keeps your nervous system in a state of high alert. The fear keeps your attention focused on detecting the threat, on trying to figure out where the presence is coming from, on trying to determine if the threat is real or imagined. The fear is adaptive in the context of an actual predator encounter, but in the context of sleep paralysis, when there is no actual threat, the fear becomes maladaptive. It intensifies the panic. It drives the feedback loops that make the episode more distressing. The white light and the sense of peace that sometimes accompany sleep paralysis might also have ancient evolutionary roots. The white light and the sense of peace are associated with the release of endogenous opioids, chemicals that are similar to morphine. These chemicals are released by the body in response to extreme pain or extreme stress. They serve a protective function by reducing the sensation of pain and by creating a sense of calm. In the context of an actual injury or an actual mortal threat, the release of endogenous opioids would be adaptive. They would reduce suffering and might allow you to continue functioning despite injury. In the context of sleep paralysis, when there is no actual injury, the release of endogenous opioids creates a sense of peace and acceptance that is not grounded in reality. Threshold consciousness. There is a particular quality to the consciousness that exists during sleep paralysis, a quality that is fundamentally different from both normal waking consciousness and normal dreaming consciousness. This threshold consciousness, this consciousness that exists at the boundary between sleep and waking, has properties that are difficult to describe, but that are profound and worth contemplating. During normal wakefulness, your consciousness is characterized by a sense of continuity. Each moment flows into the next. Your sense of self is unified and stable. Your perception of reality is relatively stable. Your sense of the passage of time is linear. You move forward through time from past to future with a clear sense of causality. Events happen for reasons, your actions have effects. The world follows rules that are consistent and predictable. During normal dreaming, your consciousness is different. Your sense of continuity is disrupted. You might be in one location, and then suddenly you are in another location without any memory of how you got there. Your sense of self might be unstable. You might be yourself, and then suddenly you might be someone else, or you might be multiple people at the same time. Your perception of reality is fluid. Physical laws might not apply. Objects might transform. People might have properties that are impossible in waking life. Your sense of the passage of time is disrupted. Minutes might feel like hours, or hours might feel like minutes. Causality might be broken. Events might happen without reason. During sleep paralysis, your consciousness combines elements of both waking and dreaming consciousness, but in a unique way. You have the sense of continuity and the sense of reality that characterizes waking consciousness, but combined with the perceptual distortions and the sense of unreality that characterizes dreaming consciousness. You are aware that something is wrong, that your perception of reality is distorted, but you cannot quite figure out what is wrong. You know that the presence you are sensing might not be real, but it feels completely real. You know that the white light might be a hallucination, but it looks like it is coming from outside of you. You know that you might be dreaming, but the experience feels more vivid, more real, more important than waking reality. This threshold consciousness has a peculiar quality of lucidity. You are not in a lucid dream, where you know you are dreaming and can control the dream. But you are not in a normal dream either, where you accept the dream as reality. Instead, you are in a state where you are aware that something unusual is happening, but you cannot quite understand what it is. You are aware of the contradiction between what you are experiencing and what you know about reality. You know that you are paralyzed, but you do not understand why. You know that there is a presence in the room, but you do not understand what it is. You know that you are seeing white light, but you do not understand where it is coming from. This state of threshold consciousness is disorienting precisely because it does not fit into your normal categories of experience. You have categories for waking consciousness and for dreaming consciousness. But threshold consciousness does not fit neatly into either category. It is a hybrid state, a state that combines elements of both, but that is fundamentally different from either. Your brain does not have a well-developed framework for interpreting threshold consciousness. Your brain is trying to make sense of an experience that does not fit into its normal categories. The result is confusion, disorientation, and fear. The philosophical implications of threshold consciousness are profound. Threshold consciousness demonstrates that consciousness is not a binary state, not something that is either present or absent, on or off. Instead, consciousness seems to exist along a spectrum, with different modes of consciousness existing at different points along that spectrum. Waking consciousness is one mode, dreaming consciousness is another. Sleep paralysis consciousness is a third. But there might be many other modes of consciousness that we do not normally experience, that exist at other points along the spectrum. Threshold consciousness also demonstrates that the sense of reality, the sense that what you are experiencing is real, is not necessarily a reliable guide to what is actually real. During threshold consciousness, you experience things that feel completely real, but that are not actually happening. Your sense of reality is generated by your brain, and your brain can be mistaken. Your brain can generate experiences that feel real, but that are hallucinations. Your brain can generate a sense that something is happening when nothing is happening. The reliability of your sense of reality is contingent on your brain being in its normal operating mode. When your brain is in an unusual mode, like threshold consciousness, your sense of reality becomes unreliable. This has implications for how we understand consciousness and reality more broadly. If your sense of reality can be so completely fooled by your own brain, how confident can you be that your sense of reality is accurate, even in normal waking consciousness? How do you know that what you are experiencing in waking consciousness is actually real? This is a question that philosophers have contemplated for centuries, but sleep paralysis and threshold consciousness provide a direct visceral experience of the unreliability of consciousness. They provide an experience that demonstrates that consciousness can be completely fooled by the brain's own activity. The threshold consciousness of sleep paralysis also has a peculiar relationship with the sense of time. Time seems to move differently in threshold consciousness than it does in either normal waking or normal dreaming. Sometimes time seems frozen, as though the episode is lasting forever. Other times, time seems to skip, as though minutes have passed in what felt like seconds. This distortion of time suggests that the brain's mechanisms for tracking time, for generating the sense of the passage of time, are disrupted during threshold consciousness. The sense of time is not something that exists independently of the brain. The sense of time is generated by the brain, and when the brain is in an unusual state, the sense of time can be distorted. Returning from the other side. The process of emerging from sleep paralysis is itself a fascinating phenomenon. Unlike waking up from normal sleep, where the transition from sleep to wakefulness is usually gradual and often imperceptible, waking up from sleep paralysis is usually sudden and often accompanied by a dramatic sense of relief and return to normal consciousness. Understanding this process of return gives us insight into the mechanisms of consciousness and the way that the brain transitions between different states. During sleep paralysis, the motor inhibition that characterizes REM sleep is still in place. Your muscles are still receiving the inhibitory signals that prevent them from moving, but your consciousness has awakened. Your higher cognitive functions are activated. You are aware, you are thinking, you are afraid. But you cannot move. This state is inherently unstable. It is a state in which two systems that are normally coordinated have become desynchronized. The motor system is still in sleep mode, but the consciousness system has entered waking mode. The return to normal consciousness involves the resynchronization of these two systems. As you remain conscious while the paralysis persists, the inhibitory signals that are preventing your muscles from moving gradually weaken. The neurotransmitter systems that maintain the REM state begin to shift. Serotonin levels begin to increase. Norepinephrine levels begin to increase. The neurochemical environment of your brain begins to shift back toward the waking state. Gradually, the inhibitory signals weaken enough that your voluntary motor control begins to return. The first sign of return is often a small movement. You might be able to move your fingers or your toes or your eyes. This small movement is often experienced as a huge relief. After being completely paralyzed, the ability to move even a small part of your body feels like a return to agency, a return to control. The small movement is often the beginning of a cascade of returning motor control. Once you can move one part of your body, the movement often spreads. You might be able to move your hand, then your arm, then your torso. The paralysis does not usually lift all at once. Instead, it lifts gradually, with different parts of your body regaining control at different times. During this process of returning motor control, you might experience unusual sensations. Your muscles might feel strange, as though they have been asleep and are waking up. You might feel tingling or prickling sensations. You might feel weakness in your muscles. You might experience spasms or jerking movements as your motor system comes back online. These sensations are the normal accompaniment of the return of motor control. Your muscles have been held in a state of immobility, and as they are released from this immobility, they go through a period of adjustment. The emotional response to the return of motor control is usually intense relief. The fear and panic that characterize the sleep paralysis episode usually evaporates almost immediately as soon as you regain the ability to move. This rapid shift in emotional state is remarkable. One moment you are in a state of overwhelming terror, convinced that you are dying, certain that something terrible is happening. The next moment, as soon as you regain the ability to move, you are flooded with relief, with gratitude, with joy at being able to move again. The episode is over. You are safe. You are back in normal consciousness. But the return to normal consciousness is not always immediate. Sometimes there is a period of confusion or disorientation that persists even after you have regained motor control. You might be awake, you might be able to move, but you might not be entirely sure what is real and what was hallucination. You might still be seeing shadows in the room. You might still be sensing a presence. You might still be uncertain whether what you experienced was real or not. This period of confusion usually resolves quickly, within a minute or two, as your brain fully transitions back to normal waking consciousness. But for a few moments, you might be in a state of uncertainty about what is real. The integration of the sleep paralysis experience into memory is also interesting. The episode is usually remembered very clearly, in vivid detail. The emotions, the sensations, the hallucinations, the sense of fear and helplessness are all remembered with striking clarity. This is in contrast to many dreams, which are often forgotten quickly and remembered only vaguely. Sleep paralysis episodes are remembered intensely, perhaps because the emotional intensity of the episode makes the memory more vivid, or perhaps because the unusual sensory experiences are more memorable than the sensory experiences of normal dreams. The way that people interpret and remember their sleep paralysis episodes is influenced by their beliefs and their understanding of what happened. Someone who understands that sleep paralysis is a neurological phenomenon, that it is not dangerous, that it is a well-known phenomenon that many people experience, will interpret the episode as an unusual neurological event. Someone who does not have this understanding might interpret the episode as evidence of supernatural phenomena, as a demonic possession, as a visitation by a spiritual entity, as a near-death experience. The same physiological event is interpreted very differently depending on the person's beliefs and knowledge. This is why education about sleep paralysis is so important. Understanding what is happening during a sleep paralysis episode can dramatically reduce the fear and the sense of danger. If you know that sleep paralysis is a temporary disruption of the normal coordination between consciousness and motor control, if you know that it is not dangerous, if you know that it will pass in a few moments, you can respond to the episode with calm rather than panic. The knowledge does not necessarily prevent the episode from happening, but it can prevent the episode from being as terrifying and as distressing. Living between deaths, we have journeyed together through the neurological, physiological, and philosophical dimensions of sleep paralysis. We have explored the mechanisms that create these episodes, the sensations that accompany them, the hallucinations that arise during them, and the ways that they connect to fundamental questions about consciousness, mortality, and existence. Now, at the end of this exploration, we arrive at a profound question. What does sleep paralysis teach us about how we should live? Sleep paralysis is a nightly rehearsal of death. Every night, your body enters a state of apparent death. Your muscles are paralyzed, your breathing becomes shallow, your heart rate drops, your consciousness enters an altered state, and then, after a few minutes or a few hours, your body returns to life. Your motor control is restored. Your breathing deepens, your heart rate increases, your consciousness returns to normal. You wake up, and you are alive again. This nightly cycle of death and rebirth is one of the most fundamental rhythms of human existence. We die every night, and we are reborn every morning. Our ancestors understood this. In many cultures, sleep was referred to as the little death, the temporary death that happens every night. Sleep was seen as a rehearsal for the final death, the death that would come at the end of life. The ancient Egyptians had a saying, "Sleep is the brother of death." The Bible refers to sleep as a temporary death from which we awake. Understanding this rhythm, understanding that we die and are reborn every night, can change how we approach life. It can reduce our fear of death, because we know from direct experience that the process of dying, the sensation of consciousness fading, the loss of motor control, these things are not necessarily terrible. We experience them every night and we survive them. We wake up the next morning and continue living. Sleep paralysis, in particular, gives us a direct experience of the proximity of death. In sleep paralysis, we experience a state that is so close to death that it is difficult to distinguish from death. We experience the inability to move, the disruption of normal consciousness, the hallucinations, the sense of a presence, the white light. If this is what death is like, then perhaps death is not something to be feared. Perhaps death is a natural process, a natural transition, something that the human nervous system is equipped to handle. Of course, sleep paralysis is not actually death. It is a temporary disruption of the normal coordination between consciousness and motor control. But the subjective experience is so similar to the experience that might accompany death that it serves as a useful rehearsal, a useful preparation. By experiencing sleep paralysis, by surviving it, by waking up and returning to normal consciousness, we gain confidence that we can handle the process of dying, that we can navigate the transition from life to whatever comes after, that we do not need to be terrified of the process. This does not mean that we should seek out sleep paralysis or that we should welcome it. Sleep paralysis is still distressing and frightening for many people. But if we can reframe our understanding of sleep paralysis, if we can see it not as a pathological symptom, but as a normal part of the sleep cycle, as a nightly rehearsal of death, then we might be able to reduce the fear and the sense of danger that accompany episodes. There is also a philosophical insight that emerges from understanding sleep paralysis and its connection to death. The fact that we die every night and are reborn every morning suggests that death might not be the permanent cessation of consciousness that we fear it might be. If consciousness can be temporarily suspended during sleep and then restored upon waking, then perhaps consciousness can be suspended at death and then restored in some other form. This is not a claim about what actually happens after death. It is simply a recognition that consciousness is more mysterious than we normally assume, that the relationship between consciousness and the physical body is more complex than simple materialism suggests. Sleep paralysis teaches us that consciousness is not as stable and permanent as we normally assume. Consciousness can be disrupted. Consciousness can be distorted. Consciousness can generate experiences that are completely disconnected from external reality. And yet, consciousness persists. Even when consciousness is disrupted, even when it is distorted, even when it is experiencing hallucinations and fear, consciousness continues. This persistence of consciousness through disruption and distortion is remarkable. It suggests that consciousness is more fundamental than the specific content of consciousness, more fundamental than the specific thoughts and sensations that consciousness contains. As we end this exploration, I want to invite you to continue your own exploration. If you have experienced sleep paralysis, I encourage you to reflect on those experiences with curiosity rather than fear. Try to understand what your brain was doing, what neurological mechanisms were being activated. Try to recognize the hallucinations as hallucinations, the sensations as sensations generated by your own brain. Try to accept the paralysis as a temporary disruption rather than a threat. If you have not experienced sleep paralysis, you might find yourself wondering if you will experience it in the future. If you do, you now have knowledge and understanding that can help you navigate the experience. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the mysteries of consciousness, mortality, and the nightly death that we all experience. If this experience has brought you insight, peace, or a sense of connection to the fundamental rhythms of human existence, I would deeply appreciate a like and a subscription to Relaxing Science. Let us know if you would like to see more content exploring the intersection of science, consciousness, and the contemplative dimensions of human experience. I invite you to return to this space whenever you need to contemplate the deeper mysteries of existence. The night is long, and sleep is waiting for you. When you close your eyes tonight, you might remember that you are about to die, to enter that threshold state between worlds, to experience the profound mystery of consciousness suspended between life and death. And perhaps with understanding and with calm, you can face that nightly death, not with fear, but with curiosity and even gratitude for the opportunity to rehearse the greatest transition of all. Sleep well and welcome to the other side. Dos.